Okay. I hope you're seeing believe. So, just as a light note here to get us started, this yellow and blue are the colors of the Golden State Warriors. So, whoever the writer was for Ted Lasso channeled the Golden State Warriors in 2007 that did something inspirational, and we're hoping they'll do something inspirational in the coming 2 months. We shall see. All right. So after that lightweight introduction, we'll go to back to the heavy guy, and it's still happening. Decades are being folded into weeks. So our agenda for today, just a brief follow-up from last week, and then we'll go into short subjects. So what is that brief follow-up? My math was off, misreading millions for billions. And so this is the comparison of Trump's cabinet and Biden's cabinet, a factor of 2,881 with 11 billionaires. Other tidbits, short subjects. It's interesting. Yeah, Bob.
It's interesting that, although not a cabinet member, Elon Musk, of course, would be the richest. But what he claims to have saved the federal government per year is now down to $150 billion a year, some of which is dubious, which is actually less than he has lost himself in the stock, in the valuation of that he has in SpaceX and Tesla. By the way, I'm going to ask a question of you, John.
Yes.
What percentage of Tesla does Elon Musk own?
I think 49, isn't it?
I'm going to ask others to give their guess.
Pipe up. Let's hear some more guesses.
I think it's like 20 or 30 or something.
Let's get one more, then I'll tell you what it is before somebody Googles it.
80.
He owns 12.2%,
Yeah.
which is less than the combined ownership of Vanguard, a fund manager, which manages your 401k probably, and BlackRock, another large fund manager. It's just astonishing how his association with Tesla has destroyed the valuation, given that he only owns 12.2%. I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you. That's interesting and edifying.
So this is Carol. My question to you guys is, did he used to own more of it and he's been selling it off? Because I'm much more like Aiko. I didn't think it was 80, but I thought it was over 50%.
Well, you have to remember he didn't found the company.
Right, but when he
So when
bought
he
it.
bought in, he probably got himself 20%, but then with further rounds of early private equity financing,
Mhm.
he would have had that diluted. I'm not sure how much he's actually sold. I don't know, but not very much actually, I would
Uh-huh.
guess.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. Thanks, Bob.
So this is Tom. So if the $150 billion number is correct, and let's just say that the federal government's budget is 6 trillion, I don't know if that number is correct. That means that all these gyrations that Musk has done decreased the federal budget by 2%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yes, but that's because he's been going after extremely tiny agencies and departments of the government. I mean, minuscule agencies.
Yeah, and then he's going to build the F-47, which is going to raise it 150 trillion, 150 billion or trillion more. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really entitlements. You know, if he is going to cut the budget by 20% as or 30% without touching entitlements, and I mean, we'll see in Congress that they've got a blueprint going forward that just contains so many contradictions, especially between the House and the Senate. And all these numbers are going to pale in comparison. Okay, well, and the big fight, of course, will be over Medicaid. For us doctors, a very painful subject.
So, John, I got a question here. Somewhere along today or in a future session, I'm not sure I understand all this reconciliation and stuff like that. Are we going to talk about that?
I'm going to try not to, because what we do is try to focus on history. And I try to stay away from breaking stories, current events. There are plenty of people that are smarter than I am about that. There are so many current events. As Lenin said, we're getting a fire hose of current events. And so I'm not planning on it. What I try to do is uh, be on the lookout for a topic that has some history behind it that would be edifying and focus just on that silo of history without trying to cover the waterfront. Very, very modest aspiration here. Okay. All right, forward we go. Another a couple of breaking events in a multipolar world that I think are going to have consequences for decades is the bonding of China and Europe in an embrace to try to oppose Trump. And one metaphor for that is the trade between China and Europe. And specifically, I'm going to look at the rail trade between China and Europe. So it's been going in the past through Russia and on the Trans-Siberian Rail and through Moscow and then distributed to Europe. But interestingly, even though China and Russia are best friends, China is developing a link, a rail link, basically through the stands and across the Caspian Sea and on through Turkey. They used to have an option of going through the Black Sea, but that's not possible now. So as it is right now, China sells more to the EU than to the United States. So that should help them a little bit in this trade war. And the ever since the Ukraine war broke out, this has made going through Turkey the only option after getting across the Caspian Sea. And one of the problems with the old rail Trans-Siberian link is the insurance costs went up. And Russia, with sanctions and war economy, wasn't able to maintain this rail line. So now he's going through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, and this is called the Middle Corridor. And then the trans countries around the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, they're pretty stable. So the load has increased dramatically as they're building up this link. The trade between Russia and China has also gone up because of the war. And Russia is providing and paying for goods with its natural resources, which by definition makes Russia a colony of China. China is also attracted to this middle path for political reasons with countries that they can influence along the way. So the shipping lanes are a problem now, right here at this pinch point. The Houthis in Yemen are making this route almost impossible. Insurance has gone up there as well, and it's followed the money. That's what's happened. The other possibility for shipping is to go all the way around Africa. That takes an awful long time. So there's another incentive for diversifying here. Shipping, by the way, is much cheaper. Trains are 35% more expensive, but China wants this hedge, and they want to build up their trade with Europe. What has China been doing to increase? It's been helping the Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan improve their ports. And then there's quicker customs now. They're streamlining that. So it does take between around 20 days, which is more than the Russian route, which was 14 days. Shipping takes a month. What about the simple alternative, avoiding the Caspian Sea and loading off and to ferries? Why don't they just go through their really good buddies, Iran? They all belong to this axis of autocrats. Well, I think the actions speak louder than words, and China doesn't trust Iran or the politics in Iran, dealing with mullahs. Even though the train ferries are more expensive and more a bother and slow things down, the Chinese trust the Kazakhs, the Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan more than they trust Iran. The other fly in the ointment is in Turkey. The Uyghurs have fled from China to Turkey. So there's some tension now between Turkey and China. We've seen it crop up before, and it's just as before, it's been about the Uyghurs. Turkey, in addition to suffering some diplomatic tension with China, also has issues with infrastructure for handling the increased load through there. So it's really interesting. We had a friend who traveled to Xinzhuang. He had been a student in Turkey and had learned some Turkish. And he was amazed when he was in Xinjiang how similar the language was. So you have this Turkic language bond that is this band all the way from China to Istanbul. And of course, Turkey is seen to be the first among equals in this Turkic language civilization. So they're bound to take Uyghurs. And China recognizes that, and it's not going to let the Uyghur issue get in the way. And that's fine because the EU, which is receiving all these goods, also wants to build a corridor to meet the Chinese developing trains from the other end. And the EU has a particular eye on the raw materials, including rare earths, in the stands. And the stands are perfectly glad to be independent of Russia because they've seen what Russia is capable of doing in Ukraine. So this is a continuing cost to Putin's aggression, his drop in trust and credibility in Central Asia. So, as I said before, formerly they could go across the Black Sea with the trains instead of the Caspian Sea. And Russia's war in Ukraine prevents that. But it's interesting to note that traditionally, in the old days, for centuries and centuries on the Silk Road, the Black Sea was a terminus, particularly Crimea on the Silk Road. And by the way, it was also how plague got to Europe in the 15th century through Crimea. A ship from Genoa went up in the Black Sea to Crimea and brought back the plague. Once the trains get through Turkey and on past Romania, they break up into a network all throughout Europe that the Chinese coordinate with the EU. So let's look at fraying American EU relations. And I've been struck with the response in the EU, a positive response with some pride in what they are vis-a-vis America. And here's one more source of pride. Immigrants are voting with their feet, and they're going more often to the EU than they are to America. And so let's just look at that. This was a graphic from the New York Times and I'm just going to run through it. The world is going to spin here, but this shows the immigrant traffic to the United States specifically. Now we're in Europe, and you can see there's more traffic here than there was in the United States, and I'll have numbers in just a second. And so EU is the biggest magnet for global migration in the world. And you look here, and this is the Gulf states here. And then what's remarkable, what seems remarkable about the look at the migration flows, looking at this map at the eastern end of the Eurasian mass.
Nobody's going there.
Nobody's going there, exactement. More people are going to Australia than are going to East Asia. And we've seen that before. I'm just going to go through this one more time so you can just compare. Another spin. Yeah, barren. Okay, I wanted to make that point. And so putting numbers on that, the EU attracts around 4.3 million people. And the United States is 2.8 million people, though the cumulative immigrant population is higher from previous years of immigration. And Europe's incentive is they have lower fertility than the United States. So they need to make up for that with immigration. We have the established population in the United States is also reproducing below break even. So we also need immigration, but not as much as the EU does. EU pride. I came across this interesting essay, A Spirited Defense of Europe. I thought it was interesting enough to pass on. This is from Charlemagne, the weekly columnist for The Economist on Europe. And Charlemagne, because he was in the 8th century united Europe. And so their graphic is the Statue of Liberty has been taken off its pedestal and is on a boat back to Europe. And they kind of snarkily point out that they don't have a politician that plays golf after wiping out savings of millions. That Europe's universities are not the place of where culture warriors fight it out. Universities, again, the fear of losing your tenure or your grant, like America's experiencing in a most terrible way these days. No detention centers awaiting foreign students with bad views on Gaza. News outfits that are not being sued or threatened. Ditto law firms who don't kowtow to Trump. And so immigration in Europe, they're kind of proud of it. So there are a lot of immigrants from Central Europe that love the European way of life. And Europeans have been more generous and welcoming than we have. Of course, they've had their problems, and the traffic across the Mediterranean often ends in great tragedy. So not everything is addressed in this essay, but they need immigrants to pick their crops, just like we do. So he grants that Europe is not as vibrant, but Europeans take August off, just the first example of lifestyle advantages. They retire earlier. They have more leisure time to play with their kids. And he maintains inequality is better controlled in Europe than it is in America. And people in Europe are not this week not looking at their stock portfolios or wondering whether they can afford to send their kids to university. And they'd have no idea what medical bankruptcy is. So, yeah, Shigeko.
Elmore said they pay a lot of taxes, like 30% or something,
Yeah,
compared to us.
oh yeah, it varies by country. The French, their top bracket pays 50%. So,
Yeah, my nephew in Cologne, Germany, he pays 55. But they have, they each get 3 months. He and his wife both get 3 months off after the baby is born. They have free school, free university. There's a lot you get for that money.
Yeah. And again, medical bankruptcy. They don't have that. So they get a lot of. Certainly pay more taxes, but they get a lot more. And we've experienced that just by seeing life through our immigrant friends in Australia. The same phenomenon. So the essay says that Europe may seem more naive, but they're only being more moral about things like invading Iraq, where they eloquently tried to prevent that George Bush from doing that in 2003. They're still complying with the World Trade Organization while we've been trying to hobble it. They're more committed to the Paris Accords to try to cut carbon, and we are just being, the Republicans are being totally irresponsible on that. And they look at the abuse of power coming from Washington, where you're setting up tariffs and inviting corruption by trying to waive tariffs for certain supplicants. So they admit they're maybe yesterday's continent, but they're still dedicated to the principles of the Enlightenment, which it's hard to argue the current government is. Again, lifestyle, walkable cities, long life expectancies. Their kids are vaccinated without a lot of furor. Of course, they don't have the gun problem that we do. And they're able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. So that was a kind of verbal twist on our Declaration of Independence. So there's a bigger question. So why are so many immigrants moving from all around the world to both the EU and North America and Australia, the West? Why is that? And one theory is maybe the kind of nationalism that we have is too unstable, or maybe it's becoming too autocratic, or maybe without the Enlightenment, it's not resilient enough. And founded on the principles of the Enlightenment. So I thought I'd take a brief look at how long has nationalism been around? When did it take off? The first intellectual to write about it was this German Herder. So there's the intellectual foundation, but on the ground, what happened? Well, the American Revolution, which is a part of what we study, and it's not just a local thing. It's a global phenomenon that was sparked by the American Revolution. Of course, it was quickly followed by the French Revolution, which had even more effects in Europe and the rise of nationalism. In this particular portrait, the teacher is pointing out, a French teacher is pointing out Alsace-Lorraine. And Alsace-Lorraine, because of nationalism in Europe, has been passing back and forth between Germany and France. And here is the history of Alsace-Lorraine. I just couldn't resist. All the times it changed hands because of war. The 30 Years' War, the Franco-Prussian War, World War I, World War II, and now it's back to being French. So Napoleon, yeah, Bob.
Oh, I just thought, as an aside, I would add that when researching my grandparents and great-grandparents, they lived. One set of grandparents lived on a street which I knew to be Lorraine Street in Berlin, except I couldn't find a Lorraine Street or Lothringenstraße in Berlin. And after the First World War, when Alsace and Lorraine passed back to France, Berlin renamed its streets, which had been named Elsassstraße or Lothringenstraße, that's Alsace or Lorrainestraße. My particular family street was renamed Torstraße or Tower Street, which, anyway, just another reflection of the backwards and forwards of Alsace and
yeah, and the backwards and forwards that if you in Berlin, if you go to the big monument there, I'm blocking on the name of it, the gate, the Brandenburg Gate. There's a gold statue of victory on top. And it's been a little bit like capture the flag, where the most recent victor has taken that statue of victory. So when the last time when Napoleon took it, he took it back to Paris. Well, Bismarck got it and took it back and put it on the Brandenburg Gate. So there's another example of physical change in addition to street names. So Napoleon, he undermined all the monarchies, and in so doing, he awakened this nationalistic and ethnic pride in all of these empires. And finally, when the empires fell apart, you got all these individual nations. And we've already talked about the American Revolution. In Latin America, the same thing from Spain. And then after World War I in particular, the creation of all these nations. I'm putting this up again. You probably remember me putting it up before. It's something that has sobered me. How long do civilizations last? And the BBC calculated 336 years. Interesting. So do nations follow the same path as civilization? What's our life expectancy as a nation? We're already next year we'll be at 250 years, below 36, but sometimes it feels like we're at the edge now with our polarization. And we have to ask, are we still redeemable? I read this interesting book, The Suicide of the West by Jonah Goldberg, and he just made the point that liberal democracies need virtuous citizens, and they seem to be in short supply these days. People that can meet in the middle and debate and come up with compromise. We're not seeing that anymore. So it just brings to mind a question that was asked of Ben Franklin. Have we got a republic or a monarchy? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. And that seems more and more relevant. So how are other democracies doing these days? Ours isn't doing too well. And this is the latest V-Dem report that just came out last month. And this V-Dem stands for the varieties of democracy. Part of a political science project that grew out in the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. And they've been publishing their annual report. And I'll get to this map in more detail in just a second. It's pretty sophisticated. These are the criteria that they grade, 16 of them. You'll see CSO here. That means civil society organizations. And so they look at each grade, each country on these 16 different realms. And it comes up with a pretty granular analysis. And it's grown so much, the tradition has become, they've developed sponsors, international sponsors. And the only thing that competes with it is Freedom House. And as I said, what Freedom House does is not as detailed, and Freedom House draws on V-Dem work. So that was last year. Maybe you remember it. Last year, Turkey was the star of the show, and it was coming to a head in Europe. And The Economist said, Democrats everywhere will take heart if the good guys win, but the good guys did not win, and so Turkey continues to be led by a strong man. And imperceptibly, it started around 20 years ago. You never know what age you're in for at least 20 years after it started. And I thought this guy made a very strong case, John Gray. He's quite a guy in Great Britain. And so, who is the strong man? You can argue that it's Putin, but it starts before Putin takes power, arguably. This is the NATO intervention in Serbia. There was a civil war going on there, and it was pretty grim. Muslims in particular were being pursued. Aiko and I took a taxi ride in China in 1999, and the taxi driver was applauding America for what they were doing in Serbia. Bill Clinton, he thought was great, and he thought Kissinger had been a great man too. And we told him that Kissinger was Jewish, and he was astounded. He couldn't believe. And then Madeleine Albright, had just discovered she was Jewish, and she was the Secretary of State at the time. And we told him, she's Jewish too, and you could almost see him recoil in disbelief. But NATO's intervention, it had to be NATO because Russia would have vetoed any action in the UN. So they abrogated the Treaty of Westphalia. What did that treaty say? It was 1648, after the 30 Years' War. It said that whatever the prince believes, everybody in the country should assume to believe, and nobody should invade another country just because the prince has chosen a religion you don't like. And that led to 300 plus years of peace in Europe, based on a certain kind of peace. Obviously, there were two world wars, but the principle of not intervening on just on the basis of religion, it did stop religious wars. Putin was going to veto that, but a commission subsequently said that what NATO had done was illegal, but nonetheless legitimate. And there was no other way to stop the killing of civilians. And that led Tony Blair to think about the doctrine of just wars. And here's Blair with Clinton. And that slowly merged into a larger debate that led to the concept in international law of the responsibility to protect, as NATO had done in Serbia. But it wasn't declared in 2005. And unfortunately, in Iraq, Blair and Bush mistook Iraq for another Serbia. And so they invoked the right to use force without the authority of the Security Council in defiance of the UN. And that led us I argue, to the era of the strongman, where if the United States and Britain can ignore the Security Council, why can't we? And it certainly has stymied our ability to mobilize support on behalf of Ukraine. The coalition of the Welling 2003, here they are. You can't read it. I spent more time on it than is warranted. I'm not going to take up more. In 2008, we doubled down, and these are all the nations that fought with us in defiance of the Security Council. Our failure there has had all these implications that we see now, and it all was arguably because of George Bush Jr., who did not have the wisdom of his father. He only won power because of name recognition, and I think that's a weakness of our system. And unfortunately, family dynamics worked into the psychology of the time, I think. Anyway, 2 years later, the UN accepted the responsibility to protect and try to prevent neighbors from perpetuating genocide and war crimes. And what had happened in the world to get the UN to accept that? It was mostly Rwanda, and again, Serbia, specifically Bosnia. And if you think about it, in 2003, we could have invoked that for the Kurds because Saddam Hussein was certainly persecuting them. But our rationale was the weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist. What's happened subsequently? We had an opportunity to forge a new world order after the fall of communism, but we blew it in Iraq. So you could argue that we've blown it in the Security Council by defending Israel constantly when they have defied UN resolutions. They have defied UN resolutions at least a dozen times, and we have exerted 42 vetoes on their behalf. So the globe looks at us for what's the right word? Hypocrisy, and what's what they've done is assembled together in the BRIC cluster of nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, sometimes an S for South Africa, and squaring off against NATO and the G7. So that's the way things are breaking out now instead of American leadership. So this year's report, bad news. 27 out of 45 autocracies or autocratizers in the process of becoming autocracies were, what time?
3.
We started late, so I'm going to go a little bit longer. We're democracies at the start of their history. Only 9 remain democracies, so that's a fatality rate of 67%. Democracies are falling left and right. And autocratizers are using media censorship, undermining elections, and civil society. Larry Diamond's a professor at Stanford, and he's got the autocrats' 12-step program. No surprises here. But when you see it all laid out, you go, holy cow, holy cow. This is a very familiar list and becoming increasingly familiar over the last 2 months. So the more people are living under autocracy and outproducing by their GNP, the GNP of people living in democracies. That hasn't been true until just recently. It's happening in every kind of situation. Democracies are still democracies, but they're getting weaker. Democracies are becoming electoral democracies, or then autocratic democracies by their classification. And autocratic states are becoming even more autocratic. So it's all the way around. The percent of the world population living in autocracy has increased from 49 to 72% in the last 20 years. We'll look at different regions now. You can see this is the color coding. So the deeper the red, the worse your score. So this is very deep red. Russia and China, they have a lot in common. They're very heavily autocratic, and so you can see that through the Middle East as well, and into Africa. And then a little bit less autocratic, but still notable, Northern Africa, and then sub-Saharan Africa. Come to the New World, oh my goodness, look at Mexico. It has developed very bad scores under AMLO. Of course, not as bad as Nicaragua or Venezuela, And Brazil has just recently become a little more blue with Lula returning. And of course, Europe still mostly. Ukraine is not as blue as it once was, but it's fighting a war. And Belarus just recently became the first really European country to become a dictatorship, essentially. Turkey, as we talked about before, can no longer be considered a democracy. A very, very sad state of affairs. So I think this is a good place to stop. We started late, so I'm going over a little bit, but now I'll stop and we'll resume next week.
Very depressing, John. Can you be more upbeat next week, please?
So I will, if things keep going in the right direction, I'll give a history of the Golden State Warriors, which will start in 2007 with that very memorable upset of Dallas. But it'll go to 2008, where in March Madness, we saw this scrawny kid, Steph Curry, just set the March Madness on fire. We'll go to 2009 when he's drafted by the Warriors, even though he doesn't want to come. And he has all these ankle problems in the early years, but he gets a good physical therapist who helps him build up his core, which improves his ankles. And to 2015, where he joined Steve Kerr in setting the basketball world on a revolutionary, exciting path that ended quite positively in Paris last summer. And if you haven't seen Court of Gold, watch it. If you don't want to spend 6 hours in basketball, just watch the last hour, and you'll see the end of the story. And as I said, possibly with an epilogue in the next couple of months. How's that, Jim? Uh-oh, I've lost my audience.
Sounds
No, you haven't.
sounds more positive.
Okay.
I have a question related to none of that.
Yes.
You right at the beginning, when we were talking about the federal budget deficit, etc., you mentioned that Medicaid, I think you said, is the bane of doctors, you and others, of the lives of doctors. Why is Medicaid?
Well, that's what's going to get cut. What I meant to say, quite inelegantly, was Medicaid's going to be the target. It's the only thing. It's the only entitlement that they can cut, because it's a matching program between the federal government and the states. It started out being 90-10, but some states now are paying more than 10%, and they might just stop.
Turn the recording off.
But I inferred from what you said that medics are that it's a burden for the medical profession in some way. I misread you completely.
Yeah, no, I that's because I didn't state it precisely, the problem.
All right. Thank you.
So this is Carol. So it's great because you guys can correct me. My impression was that the reason Medicaid is, oh, maybe it's Medicare. Never mind. It's Medicare, not Medicaid. That I
Yeah,
was thinking about.
yeah. Yeah, what we really need, I think, is to get away from fee for service and to get into a prepaid health plan like Kaiser. That's what I think.
Right. And cycling back to the very beginning of the talk and talking about income taxes and how much tax we pay, part of what those European and other states that are supposedly paying high taxes, it covers their medical, and their medical is not attached to a job. So it allows much more freedom. And I think that if at one point I had looked back at all of the supplementary taxes that we pay, and it ends up being, but I'm paying 50% when I add everything all together.
Yeah, yeah. And California has put,
California, yes. Yeah. And part of it's because we have clean water and we have cleaner fuel and we have, we want more, uh, we want those to be part of what we get living in California, and other states don't don't have those same luxuries, I guess.
yeah, yeah. And traditionally, California, their version of Obamacare has been very expansive and generous. And that's what worries me, Bob, is we've been so expansive with our Medicaid, which we call Medi-Cal, that it's just a ripe target. It's going to, the level of care that we've become accustomed to when we had Obama and Biden, we're going to be punished. So I'm particularly worried about California.
On the subject of Medi-Cal and how expansive it is, California is one of the few states which covers undocumented people too. And the population is estimated undocumented to be 1.6 million people. But I saw recently a budget item go through the assembly, I guess, in which it estimated $8 billion cost for 1.6 million undocumented. And my quick understanding of that was that's absolutely impossible. That would assume that all 1.6 million undocumented, who are mostly hardworking, prime in their prime aged men and women, not old people like me. And I think that 8 billion, which is the estimate, which has riled up a lot of conservatives in California, must be a kind of statistical extrapolation of what Medi-Cal costs per person. And I don't believe 1.6 million undocumented workers in fields, backyards, and people's homes and restaurants are going to incur 5 visits a year each, every man, woman, and child, to incur that $5,000 a year. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, and the other thing, I bet a lot of undocumented don't want to get on that radar screen. They don't want to know.
Totally.
They don't want to fill out a form, and
Yeah, I'm actually astonished at the bravery of undocumented people signing up for Medi-Cal. Why would they do that?
Yeah. Well, some of them have really bad health problems, and some of them are older, and you would be lucky to get away for $5,000 a year. The cost of medical care. Now, some of it, in fact, has become prorated and not fee for service. So you have that efficiency. But there's a lot of sick Medi-Cal patients. Jim and I can verify.
Yeah, but I was talking about undocumented, who
Yeah.
I would claim only from my limited experience, only knowing prime working age undocumented immigrants, and only 2 or 3 of those, that they are not the cause of $8 billion a year of estimated undocumented Medi-Cal costs.
Well, I can imagine it actually, Bob, because when those young people don't sign up, the only people that sign up are the ones that are so sick that are willing to take the risk of getting on the government radar. And sick people can generate an awful lot of cost in our system, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, if you work the arithmetic out, in round numbers, 8 billion divided by 2 million people, that's roughly $4,000 a year, $400 a month. So the numbers don't seem that far off, because if you're on Medicare, each individual pays, I can't remember what the number is, but close to $400, close to $400 or $500 a month in